Hello, everyone. This is Meredith with Four Sober Chicks podcast, and today I'm always joined by Heather, Dana, and our fourth sober chick is Miss Betsy Spier. I'm so excited to have you on today. So, just a quick little bio. I'm going to read your bio really fast, and then we're going to kind of just let you tell us your story, kind of where you were, what happened, and where you are now. Betsy is a licensed marriage and family therapist with more than 30 years in the field of mental health and addictive disorders. She's also a woman in recovery. And when we chatted on the phone, you are 35 years in? No,
I'll be 39 in 4 weeks.
39 years in sobriety. That is absolutely amazing. So kudos to you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, tell us about yourself, Betsy.
Oh boy. Well, I think I'm going to go backwards from here because, you know, being sober this long is so weird at times. I'm sober, you know, I got sober at 27, so you get my age. And so I've been sober a really long time, and I don't know life right now without it. And even though, in my life, I've lost both my parents have passed, my sister passed, my wife passed 2.5 years ago. And so, what I can say is I've stayed sober through all the no matter what in life, I think. Loss of job, no money, barely making it, and am at a place in my life where my life feels really good and even and pretty stable. Um, there's a part of me, it's like I'm afraid to say that because in the proverbial shit hits the fan. Am I allowed to curse? I don't know. So anyway, okay, good. Because I was thinking it's Lent time, though I'm not religious, have never been religious. And I have a friend who is, and she always gives up social media at Lent. And I was thinking, well, maybe I should give up saying fuck, but I just can't. I just can't. Okay. It's part of, my thing. Um, because what I've noticed over the years is it's like life is for living. I I can't sweat all the crap in life anymore. It's like, what is the most important thing for me? Who are the people that are most important? What is the work that I do is so rich now. And, you know, I I just find, regardless of all the stuff that's happened to me, I'm so okay, you know, and it's a direct result of long-term sobriety and being in my 60s. I think I can either go, there's that thing, and I do talk about AA because that's how I got sober, but it's not the only way, right? But there's a thing about acceptance, right? It's like when my sister got sick, I was 9 years sober. And I could, accept the fact that she was dying, or I could be pissed all the time, right? And so, yeah, I had my moments of really being angry and the loss of my big sister. But was I going to do? I had to accept the fact that this was what was going to happen. We can accept it or rail against it. And that's kind of where I am in my life. It's like, accept the fact that I'm at this place in my life. And so I will go back to the what I was like was a 14-year-old smoking weed, drinking beer, running from the cops on Long Island in New York. And, you know, um, acting out. I mean, I had my family was fine. There was nothing horrible about my family except that I felt like I didn't fit. Right. And I think that was the fuel for me, that I didn't fit. I felt like I didn't fit in my own skin. I didn't like how I felt. When I was really young, my mother says to me, she says, "Why are you so sensitive?" And I'm like, No, because I am, right? Because I am sensitive. I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be so sensitive. It was hell being so sensitive. And, what, 60 years later, I'm like so grateful I'm so sensitive because it makes me a really good clinician. Makes me able to connect and have empathy and really be present with people, right? Really be present. Um, so, at 14, I was, I hated school. I didn't like myself. I didn't like the fact that I think I was a queer kid and I didn't want to be. I just didn't want to be. Couldn't fit in. This was the 60s. It was not okay. Not okay at all. And so I drank and used so that I could hang out and be with boys. It was what I did, right? And so that just continued and continued and continued for years. And I I am a garbage can addict. I used every single thing I could get my hands on to make me feel different, to make me feel like I could calm down, be in my own skin, and be part of the world. And so when I was 15, right before I turned 15, we moved to California, which was really good because I needed a geographic early. I was really getting into trouble already. And so we moved to Southern California, and I immediately found my little pothead friend across the street. Well, right? You just do, right? Then the first week of school, I found all the stoners behind the music bungalow, and we all smoked on campus. I mean, I don't know what we were thinking, right? This was 72, 73. So in 1973, I got arrested for half a joint and off grounds school during school time, during nutrition break. I thought it was a good nutrition break for me. And so nothing really happened. I was 16, they counseled me and released me. So that was my foray with being handcuffed by the police. Yeah. Never happened again. Though I did drink and drive, and I got stopped by the police, by the highway patrol, and he let me go. I was so drunk and he let me go. This was this was years later. This was about like 82 or 83, right before I started my really bad downward spiral. And what happened for me was I was in a relationship. I was getting my bachelor degree. Now, it took me 9 years to get my bachelor degree because it was getting in the way of my going to bars and etc. And so I just was, I barely doing stuff. Now, I was the kind of addict who always paid my rent, always paid my car insurance. I don't, it was like those were two important things. If I got stopped, I had insurance, I had my license, and I had a place to live, right? Now I was eating garbage because all my money was going to drugs and alcohol, all of it. And so, so that was that. So in 1984, it was it was New Year's Eve of 1983. My girlfriend and I were drinking all day, and I got really pissed and really drunk. And she left me at the bar and went home without me. And so I walked home in the middle of the night, whatever time it was. So I banged on our door because it was locked and I didn't have a key because she took my car. And she finally let me in, and we got into this horrible fight. And my blood was on the wall of the bathroom. I flipped a tape. This is what alcohol did for me at the end. The police came. Nobody was arrested. It was just about, okay, you guys got to be quiet because it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Um, and so I went and spent the night at my friend's house, and then we were going to Hawaii on vacation 3 days later. And we went. Now, I knew alcohol was a problem. because I was getting angry and depressed, and I'm not an angry, acting out kind of person. So we went to Hawaii and immediately went to the pot field because I wasn't going to be drinking. So we went to the pot field. So I tried some controlled drinking and it was really miserable. I hated it because it's like, give me one drink. And it's like, not what? It's like, ridiculous. So about, let's see, it was end of February. Actually, the last time I had a drink was 40 years ago in 2 days. 40 years. And it was a night where we had another fight and I just left the house and I was going to go end my life because it was done. I was like, I couldn't not drink. I couldn't drink, right? I couldn't have this life that I thought I wanted. And so I got in the car and there's this on ramp on the freeway that I was going to turn the wheel and just go into the center divider. That was in my head. That was my plan. Go to the liquor store, get some more booze, and then do that. And for the first time, my girlfriend followed me out of the house after a fight. And I saw her in the rearview mirror and I turned the car around and we went to a hospital and I went to the emergency room. And I got the feeling I had was this nurse looked at me like I was the biggest piece of garbage. Like, what are you doing? Right? I was 26 or 25 or 26 and just, I felt like my life was over. So I went into this program there and because it was I finally was in the last semester of college, so I couldn't stay as an inpatient. So I did the outpatient program and I graduated that June. This was February to June. And in that time, I knew that alcohol, I, for some reason in the hospital, I found the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in in the bedside table. And it opened to chapter 5, whatever, right? And I read the 12 steps. And the first step was so profound for me because I knew I was powerless over alcohol and my life was unmanageable. I knew it. What I didn't know, and it was back here, was there was this voice that said, but marijuana's different. And it was so clear to me. And so I went through group and I went to meetings and I did what I was supposed to do. And in 6 weeks, I was doing a catering party and everybody's drinking. And I thought marijuana was different. So first time, and I hadn't been sober for 6 weeks since I first put beer or alcohol in my body. Beer, alcohol, marijuana, anything in my body. And I got really high. And I thought, oh, okay. So I go back to meetings and I don't tell anybody. And I took dirty chips, I did that whole little silly thing, right? And so marijuana became, then I did a little cocaine, then I did a little crystal meth, and crystal meth made me crazy. It made me so paranoid. And I only did it for about a month or two. And I was working in restaurant business in the height of the 80s where restaurants were like in Los Angeles, like the thing, owned by famous people, this restaurant. Famous people were in all the time. We were doing an Oscar party. It was this time of year, actually. And so in 1985, I hit my bottom with it. And I was like, I was a hostess. So I had to be, hello, welcome, blah, 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 blah. I couldn't look anybody in the eye anymore. I just couldn't. And we had an Oscar party we were doing, and it was going to be like so amazing. And I couldn't go. And I was supposed to be working the door. I was supposed to be the welcoming committee, right? And I called the manager, I called our insurance, and I found a treatment center in LA. And I went into treatment, and not because I was getting loaded every day, but because I couldn't stop the obsession. My thinking was so skewed and it was so negative. My self-loathing was so great because the year before, when I got sober the first time, I saw the light in people's eyes. I didn't know what it was. I thought everybody was full of crap. And I read that big book. That first year, I read the big book. I read the 12 and 12. I read, those 24-hour-a-day books that, whatever. And I knew where there were meetings and I couldn't go. Couldn't make myself get out of myself. And so I needed to be taken away from my life for a minute. And I ended up in this hospital. And I was there for, I think, 24 days because that's what my insurance covered. And I needed to go back to work because I was self-supporting. I just was. Um, and, Alcoholics Anonymous was really important in my sobriety. And if you know the steps, there is God and higher power and all that stuff in what, 7 of them? And I had no ability to deal with that. I grew up in a house with a Jewish father and a Lutheran mother, and God was of the intellect. God was for weak people. And so I had such a hard time. And I did it anyway, because I didn't have a better idea. I remember one day I was living alone and it was a Saturday and I had these beautiful glasses and I poured myself a drink in the middle of the afternoon. And I thought, if you do this, you're going to drink the rest of the bottle. I mean, and this was a few years before I stopped. So I couldn't not, right? And I knew that I couldn't do it by myself. I just couldn't. And so my journey began in that hospital on March 27th is my sobriety date of 1985. So in 4 weeks and 1 day or 2 days, I'll be 39 years sober, which is freaking crazy to me. Crazy to me. And all those things that happen in life, right? I was broke for years. I worked in the restaurant business. When I was how long was I sober? 92. I was 4.5 years sober and I went back to graduate school. And is that right? Oh my God, that's true. I graduated in 93 with a master's in clinical psych. I didn't have an idea that that's what my life was going to be. And when I was in school, I'm thinking, what if I don't want to do this? I'm going to spend all this money and all this time. And what if I don't want to do this? And so, I wasn't a clinician for a while. I was for a couple years, did my hours, was doing my hours. And then I got a job working in South Central Los Angeles, in Compton and Linwood and Watts, and was an in-home counselor working for this organization. And it's still around today, which is such a beautiful thing. That was in 96. And I worked there for a few years, and I have this weird thing. I was telling somebody yesterday at it was an event for a treatment center that I went to yesterday. And I said, I work for someplace for 6 months and then they promote me to manager. So I'm never doing, it's just so weird, right? It's just been my career has been like that. So I have worked from Compton to Malibu and all places in between. I've been a therapist, I've been a drug counselor, I've been a manager, executive director, and now I am chief clinical officer of Rainbow Hill Recovery in Mid Wilshire. So that's kind of that. And I don't know what else. I think I've talked a lot.
That's the whole point. I think like on
I could
our
keep going.
on our phone conversation though, it's these stories that we really rely on connecting with people and bringing them into this space of maybe it's something that they need to lean into a little bit more. Maybe because for so long with my addiction, I thought I was the crazy one. I was like, no one else is like me.
Right, right.
I am struggling by myself because I've done this to myself, but these other people over here, they don't have the same issues that I do. And
Right.
so it wasn't until I started to find like similarities. And I'll be honest with you, March 24th is my sobriety date.
How
Uh,
cool.
so it'll be 10 years for me this March.
Wonderful.
And 10 years ago, in a generation that was being enabled to drink,
Mhm.
that was what you did. You went to college and you
Sure.
partied. It didn't matter if you had never done it in high school, whatever, but we were almost like trained, like, no, this is what you do. And so for me, with like past trauma, the older I got, the trauma almost festered to the point where I had to drink more to numb that and kind of make that go away. Because at one, I didn't want to deal with it. Two, I thought if I numbed it enough, it would just go away. And then enter motherhood, and it just like erupted. And so I started, once I became sober, I started slowly, like obviously my inner circle knew that I wasn't drinking, and I
Mhm.
slowly started telling people, and the amount of people that were like, oh my, you had a problem?
Mhm.
Okay. But I was like, well, I hit it a lot. There were days that I, same with you, got pulled over, should have been arrested, wasn't, or I got home miraculously, or I'm driving my children
Right.
while under the influence. Like so many things that I'm not proud of. But we tend to hide it really well, because at that point in my life, I wanted everyone to think I had it together, but behind the curtains, it was a disaster. Um, so I
Especially
feel,
inside, right? Inside.
yes, yep, yep. And I had to hit the proverbial rock
Mhm.
bottom. And we talk a lot on this podcast where if we can help one person not get to the depths that we got to, like if someone can just be like, you know what, like, I don't know if I need it, or maybe I should scale back or whatever, without kind of having their life imploding.
Oh, yeah.
Like I will do this until the day I die, just to get that one person that doesn't have to go there. But then on the other end of the spectrum, I have the type of personality where that had to happen
Mm.
in order for me to be solely committed to not drinking.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I didn't quit drinking, it was going to evolve probably into drugs.
Mhm.
Just knowing myself, one wasn't going to be enough, because I'd gotten to the point where I was like, oh, well, maybe I should switch my drink of choice if it's taking me 4 bottles of wine.
Right.
Maybe I should just go straight to vodka. You start doing that, and then you're like, well, should I start adding this other little thing over
Mhm.
here? And that would just, so I knew where my life was headed. But it had to take a real drastic moment for that to be a complete wake up call for me.
Yeah.
Big time.
Mine was about this horrible self-loathing that I couldn't bear anymore. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't live with myself. I knew I had to do something different. And I didn't know what the trajectory of my life would be. Right? Who knows, right? And that hindsight thing is like, okay, now look at it. It's like, wow. Wow, what's happened in the last 38 years to me, with me, for me, right?
Right. And you're here to experience it because you are
Yeah,
sober.
right.
Right. Like I know if I wasn't sober, I don't think I would be, I don't know. My mother didn't survive this
Mm.
disease. Um, and I lost my father early. And so those were my role models, right? That's where how I learned to cope.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in California too, like in that age. My parents were growing it, and like it was all around. And I'm a, child of a hippie family.
Mhm.
And so those were, pot's natural, right? So there was never boundaries or things around substances, as well as any kind of modeling of how to manage emotion, how to manage things. And so that's your default, even though I didn't want, Meredith and I have talked a lot because we both have moms that were in active addiction. You don't want to be there, but you just run so fast right in that direction because that's the trajectory that's the path, the familiarity, and it takes, I think, a great deal of strength to break those generational changes or to break that pattern, right? And this is why I really needed treatment. I really needed AA because I needed that community to lean on while I was doing these things. And that community can look different for everyone, but that insatiable shame that you're talking about, that self-loathing, that thrives in darkness. That thrives in isolation. It does not thrive in exposure. And when you talk about it, when you share it with someone, you cut it in half, that's where that community aspect of it is so critical. And I love that you have now become a professional and do this professionally as well as I am as also an art therapist. And I've been a therapist I'm a dinosaur art therapist. I've been a therapist for over 20 years. Um, and I also think it's one of my greatest strengths that I have been through adversity because I have compassion and I have empathy for people and I can hold space for people. And that's really my gift
Yeah.
from everything that I've been through. And I don't get the gift if I don't put my sobriety first. So I really resonated. So I would love to hear kind of how, you said you went and got this graduate degree and you didn't know that you were going to kind of do this and you went in and out. So what is it like being a therapist in recovery and working in this space as your career?
Well, when I first got sober, my drug counselor in the hospital says, "You would make a great counselor." And my first thought was, "What are you talking about? I'm like a minute sober, right?" It's like, "Leave me alone," was really what I wanted to say. "Would you just leave me alone?" Right? And so I was in the restaurant business, and then as I aged, right? And as actually I was longer than 5. I was like 7 years sober when I went to graduate school. Sorry. I got really depressed feeding people because in Los Angeles, the entitlement, and because I worked in like the best restaurants in town, right? And so the entitlement was just horrible. Now, think about when you're hungry, people are angry and not very nice usually, right? So if the food doesn't come fast enough or the drinks don't come fast enough, you know. And so there was that, and then there was like this dis-ease, unrest inside me. It's like I got to do more with myself. So ended up going to graduate school, and how I ended up in this field was because I couldn't get another job in anything else. It just happened that way, right? Those were that was what was open for me. It was a perinatal substance abuse facility. That's when it was called substance abuse, right? In South Central. And it was founded by this pediatrician who kept um, taking care of crack babies. So there had to be something had to happen for the moms, right? So it was founded. So I ended up doing that work. And as the years progressed, I've worked in mental health, purely mental health clinics, but there's always substance there, always substance. The self-medicating when you're depressed, when you're anxious, when you're schizophrenic, doesn't matter, you know. And then I worked for an AIDS organization for a while because I needed to get away from substance, but that was, I mean, chemsex and that whole thing Now it's called chemsex. Then it was just, you know, sex and drugs, right? And barebacking and doing those crazy things that these gay men were doing at the time, right? That, and I was working in the field. So, you know, and then through the years, what happened for me was I got bored being a clinician and just doing talk therapy. So I went back and I took a course in brain spotting, which is a trauma modality to deal with trauma. It encompasses mindfulness, somatic experiencing, and EMDR, if you know what those things are. And so I started learning some experiential stuff. And then I was gifted a experiential weekend for clinicians at a place called On-Site Workshops in Tennessee. And I ended up doing this thing, and I was like, oh my God, this is what's been missing. So what it is gestalt and writing and art and all these things put together. So we get out of the prefrontal cortex back into the crazy dinosaur brain, right? That reptilian brain. And so I've started doing that, and it's changed the way I do therapy. It's changed the way I've been in therapy for myself. That's what this leadership, that's why I'm going to Colorado next week or this week, actually, to be in my leadership retreat. And we do psychodrama. And so I have about probably over 400 hours of psychodrama training that I've been part of. I have a couple of mentors, and it's changed how I do work because, you know, you know, the sayings, the sayings that there are now. Well, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection,
Yeah.
right? It's connection, because addicts are alone mostly, right? We are alone. We go internal, even though we're maybe out at bars and partying, but really we internalize all our stuff. So these experiential therapies help externalize everything.
You're
Right?
speaking my language. You're speaking, I mean, this is
Yay.
what I do, this is, and I work with women in addiction, and you know, I use art and movement and
Mm,
music to help
yeah,
stimulate both hemispheres of the brain so that we start to get them to work together, process trauma. Yeah, same, a lot of the similar things with brain spotting, and I do it with movement, music, and art. And
beautiful.
it's groundbreaking. I absolutely, like, yeah, I love it. It's what was missing. It's a secret sauce. So definitely loving what you're doing with that.
And that's what's made it so much more fun for me. And it's like I've got a renewed, life here as a clinician. And that's what I'm bringing to Rainbow Hill also, right? I mean, I've been a therapist for over 30 years, and I was burnt out, and I am not burnt out anymore, you know.
What is, this is my ignorance. What is psychodrama? Is it psycho
Oh.
drama, trauma, drama, psychodrama?
Psychodrama is all about movement. It's all about being able to act instead of talk. Act what's going on with us. Okay? It's about really going from our head to our heart to our body. And it's enacting different experiences in life. Aside from being a therapist and running treatment centers for the last 20 plus years, I'm a writer. And in one of my leadership retreats, probably it was 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I did I did a I did a piece of work, is what we call it, a piece of work around my writing trauma. And my writing trauma was my mother. My mother was from Germany and moved to the States in 1936 when Hitler was rising. So she became extremely, oh, I don't know, rigid, I would say. Okay. And English was not her first language. So English grammar was so important to her. So I'm going to give you the thing about what psychodrama is. Okay. So in my it's so weird, I'm getting like high talking about this. This is what happens with psychodrama. Okay. it changes our brain chemistry. So I was in this group, and so we recreated my desk as a kid. And I was sitting at my desk. And my mother is always over my left shoulder correcting what I'm writing. So I had somebody play my mother talking. Now you need to put a period there. You need to put a, what does that sentence mean? And why are you, that kind of stuff, talking to me while I'm writing, while I'm trying to write. That's a psychodrama piece. We reenacted that moment, right? And what's happened for me since then is I've been writing a lot. It changes how we see ourselves, how we feel.
I like that. That's very interesting. There's a lot of acting out I should be doing probably.
Well, I think it's one of the things that I'm doing at Rainbow Hill is we're doing a lot of experiential stuff. We're doing art. We're doing, we're going to the museums. We're getting people in touch with what really resonates instead of relapse prevention groups. It's like, I want to, really. A lot of people have been in treatment before, and how many relapse prevention groups can you go to? Yes, it's important, right? But getting into, that 19 inches from the head to the heart is the longest journey we got, and the hardest.
Thank you for that explanation.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
And we love, the work that you guys are doing at Rainbow Hill. We've had the opportunity to sit down and to hear about all the incredible work, and that episode will already have aired. But to have spaces for individuals who already feel other because of their sexual orientation, and then to also have addiction on that. I mean, we already feel other enough. And when society does that to you again as well. So, the entire, all the people of color, of different, orientations, of different financial, like we're really trying this year, to shed light on the humans of recovery and what that looks like. And so thank you for your part in having a place for humans to recover.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. I love it.
Thank
I
you.
wouldn't do it differently.
I think we're caught, but you're right. Like we're just directed. Like you said, you kind of just ended up where you ended up exactly where you needed to be.
Yeah. And, we just go where, I just go where I'm kind of moving, right? Where am I going today?
I love it.
Awesome.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Betsy. I hope that it was good for you as well, just to have that dialogue. I think, again, it's really important to be as open and just talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I know, right? Yeah.
We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Really good to meet you all.
Awesome. Okay.
Thanks
We
so
will
much.
see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.